Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Speaker, you have been recalled to the House because it was felt that there had been inadequate time given to the opposition in order to respond to comments made by the Minister. In so doing, Mr. Chairman, I took the closure motion and reported to the House, quoting Speaker's rulings 64/4 and 64/5, in the fact, sir, which states that the chairperson is the sole judge as to whether or not he ought to sanction the putting of the closure motion, and it must be left entirely in his hands. I further went on, Mr. Speaker, to point out 64/5, that is not for the Speaker to second-guess the chairperson's judgment. And of course, sir, there's also 64/6, which says the chairperson, who is the person who listens to the ebb and flow of the debate and is the person best placed to see whether the committee is of a mind to accept the closure motion. There had, sir, already been put 4 closure motions which had been rejected by myself as the chair of the committee, and in accepting the closure, sir, I did so in the belief that the debate had been well transversed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Honourable Trevor Mallard.
And the first point I want to make clear, sir, is that this is not in any way a reflection on the chair of the committee, but I think it is particularly unusual circumstances, and that in this case it is my understanding that the Minister spoke subsequently to the moving of closure motions, which is a most unusual situation that we're in. In speaking, what she did was attack a person who'd asked questions earlier. That person, my colleague, Mr. Hipkins, from that point on sought the call, and to be fair, one Labour member and one Green member got the call, but because my colleague had had a previous call, but he was actively seeking the call over that time. And Mr. Speaker, I have not, in my time in Parliament, ever seen an arrangement whereby a closure is taken subsequent to an attack on an opposition member, where that opposition member is attempting to respond and to clarify, and not being given the chance to do that. So again, I want to reiterate that it's with a somewhat heavy heart that I'm doing this, because of my colleague, Mr. Robertson, is generally a very fair and has good judgment. I just think in this particular case, Mr. Speaker, an error of judgment which leaves one of my colleagues maligned is something which is not acceptable.
Tim Macindoe.
Question. Could I point out that this part is a very small part of the bill? The opposition have had 9 calls that spread across 3 opposition parties. The Minister, when she took her second call, spoke very briefly in direct response to a number of points that, in her view, had been made erroneously by opposition speakers. She did not launch an attack. She simply responded to material that she believed needed to be corrected. We have spent the best part of an hour on this, and as the Chairman has indicated, there had been 3 previous closure motions. He accepted the 4th.
Speaking further to the point of order, Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And this is a very contentious clause, and therefore, we're not taking this course of action lightly. The issue that's at hand here is that the Minister, in fact, took 2 calls in this debate. I was the first person to speak in the committee stage of the debate on this particular clause. The Minister then spoke in quite a wide-ranging way, including moving back to Part A of the bill that we'd already Part 1 of the bill that we'd already concluded the debate on, and opened up quite a range of material. From that point onwards, I started seeking the call. The Minister was given an additional call after that, and after several closure motions had been moved and rejected by the chairperson. The chairperson then took, after the most recent contribution from the Minister, 2 further calls, one from a Labour member who had not spoken and one from a Green member who had spoken already in the debate. The issue really that I'm asking for further clarification on is I guess there's a couple. One is the ability to respond to comments that a minister makes, particularly if they're reasonably early on in the debate, and a member consistently seeks a call to respond to those, because that has certainly been the case here. As the spokesperson for the party on an issue, I think that that's important, particularly where it's a contentious issue. The debating on the clause, while it's a part 2 of the bill and it's a consequential amendment, the debate has largely been focused on the provisions in this part. And in fact, the person who's deviated the most from that has been the minister who was speaking in it. These are quite serious issues, and I think it's really important that the House has an opportunity to respond to comments that the minister has made. And that's the reason why we've asked you to come back and give us a considered ruling on the matter.
I thank the members for their contribution, and I acknowledge that the decision to recall the Speaker was not taken lightly in view of the explanations that have been given. However, having listened to the last part of the debate myself in my office and watching the chairperson decide to accept a closure motion, I am persuaded by the comments by the chairperson that he felt an adequate amount of time had been given to the clause. He had not taken, I think he said, 4 earlier decisions or calls for closure. Mr Hipkins, in the earlier part of the debate before the Speaker was recalled, said that it was convention that if a minister had spoken, that another member who should have the opportunity to respond. I am not aware of that convention. I'm advised that there is that is not a convention, though I accept it may have happened in the past. At the end of the day, the chairperson is the person who's been listening to the totality of the debate. He is the best person to decide when to accept the closure motion, and on that basis, I think the chairperson should return now to the committee. Point of order, Honourable.
There are 2 points, and I'm not asking you to sort of totally reconsider your ruling, because I accept that, but there are 2 points, and one is that we did have a change in chairperson partway through this process, and I think that's something which is relatively important, in that this chairperson was not in the House for the totality of the debate, and I think that's important. The other point, and it's one which is slightly more concerning, Sir, is the point that was made both by you and by the chairperson as part of the reasoning for accepting the closure, and that was the number of times it had been asked for. Mr. Speaker, that should never be a factor. Otherwise, people will just start asking right at the beginning. I think in the past it's been that the debate has been fair, not the time that had been asked for, the number of times that have been asked for.
And I accept the point that, again, the member's making. The number of times that a closure is called for should not in any way determine when a chairman decides that the debate has adequately been given sufficient time within the committee, and I don't want to give the impression that that's a reason that I would accept the decision of the chairman. At the end of the day, the presiding officer is the one who is best to determine when the closure motion should be accepted. Mr Robertson has done that. It is now in the hands of the House to determine whether that closure motion is accepted. I declare the House in committee.
Mr Speaker.
Mr Chairman.